What's happening, everybody? Ryan Thomas, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Very excited to start a new addition to the podcast, a new little bit of a sidebar to the podcast, a little bit of a segment to the podcast, and it'll be titled Ryan Thomas's Recent MMA Recap. Talking about the newest, most recent storylines in the sport of mixed martial arts. Today, on today's show, May 8th, May 9th, man, I don't even know what day it is. I'm behind. May 8th. And it's been a bit. I haven't been on the podcast in a little while. Post-draft, needed to kind of just take about a week off. As I say, Sundays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Posted stuff live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page, but I'm coming to you live now from Spreaker, simulcasting, streaming on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And today's show is going to be MMA oriented. I'm going to be doing, obviously, a recent recap of some of the most recent MMA storylines. And first off, want to start off with the UFC action that took place last weekend. Main event of the evening, Al Iaquinta, Donald Cerrone. Iaquinta heading into the bout ranked 4th. Donald Cerrone ranked 8th. So with a win, this was a huge fight for the UFC 155-pound lightweight division. And it was a great fight. Donald Cerrone dominated Al Iaquinta. Dad, Donald Cerrone, is now 3-0 as a father since the birth of his son, Danger Cerrone, which is probably the most badass name that you could come up with for your child. Danger, literally named Danger. Donald Cerrone, though, Cowboy Cerrone, is 3-0 and is now ranked, according to the UFC.com rankings, at 4th in the UFC lightweight division. Al Iaquinta, with this loss, drops down to 6th in the UFC. Excuse me, in the UFC rankings, and this fight was probably ranks right up there as one of Donald Cerrone's most signature performances. I'm starting to sense that there is some new life in that body of his, that there's some new life in that brain of his. The mentality has changed. There were a lot of distractions at his previous longtime home, his training home of Jackson Winklejohn. He left Jackson Winklejohn and even fought against Jackson Winklejohn in a victory over Mike Perry, and is 3-0. 2 wins at lightweight, 1 win at welterweight, beating Mike Perry, Alexander Hernandez, and now Al Iaquinta. 3 great wins for Donald Cerrone. And where does this leave Donald Cerrone as far as the UFC title picture? I truly believe that the next fight for Donald Cerrone has to be, it simply has to be Conor McGregor. The fight makes way too much sense. If this fight does not happen, I would consider putting it at the top of my fights that never happened that I wanted to see so badly, but I didn't get to see. I would put Cerrone and McGregor number 1. A hardcore, lifelong fan like me, like myself, since the early days of this sport, seeing the ebbs and flows of this sport, knowing that Cowboy Cerrone has been a mainstay in this sport for the last 15 years, to take on the big name, the moneymaker, the biggest name that the sport has ever produced, and Conor McGregor would be a true treat for me as a fan, and it would be a fight that would make a lot of dollars and a lot of sense, and it would need no introduction. Both of these guys are fully established. Both of these guys are 2 massive names in the sport. And really, I think it's the only fight for Conor McGregor on the flip side. On the flip side of it, I think Conor needs to fight someone that with a win puts him right back into title contention. Nate Diaz does not do that. A win over Donald Cerrone does do that. Nate Diaz hasn't fought in 3 years. Donald Cerrone in 3 years has probably fought 15 times. This guy is just an American badass, and he really deserves the opportunity to be on the spotlight, to be under the stage, under the spotlight on this stage, I should say, versus Conor. And really, his performance versus Al Iaquinta showed me a lot of newfound facets of his stand-up game. These straight punches, the jab, the straight right, the ability to throw punches right down the pipe Donald Cerrone was fighting very well Saturday night. Ali Quinta, though, in this loss, it's a tough loss for him, but a loss nonetheless to a guy that really is one of the toughest SOBs on the planet. So really, how far does Ali Quinta's stock drop with this loss? I really don't think it drops that much. I think when looking at what's next for Al, maybe Justin Gaethje, maybe somebody in that top 10, maybe even Anthony Pettis if he goes back down to lightweight. Either way, Ali Quinta is a mainstay in this division. He's a top 10 guy. That we do know. He's a top 6 guy right now in the world. Maybe Ali Quinta fights Tony Ferguson. Maybe they put him in that fight. Only time will tell. It's very tough to say what is next. Maybe a return fight against Paul Felder. They were supposed to fight prior to Ali Quinta taking the fight with Khabib for the championship back in UFC Brooklyn, the whole Conor bus attack, all that crap. Tony Ferguson getting hurt. That whole thing. Maybe we'll see Paul Felder and Ali Quinta. Oh, excuse me. Maybe that's what we'll see. Only time will tell. But great performance by Cerrone. I really feel as if Cerrone and McGregor is the fight to make, and it's a fight that has to happen. It just simply has to happen. You have very few fights in this sport that if they don't happen, every fan will be disappointed. And yeah, DC not fighting Brock Lesnar, there's some fans out there that were let down by that. I'm not one of them, really. I just feel like I got tricked. I feel like I got played. But if Donald Cerrone and Conor McGregor never fight, I'd be very disappointed. That would be at the top of my list as far as fights that were supposed to happen that didn't happen. And I really hope Dana doesn't get in the way of the fight happening. But then again, everything goes through Dana. So whether it happens or doesn't, it really falls on Dana at this point too. Shifting gears here, Bellator MMA had some action this weekend where Rory MacDonald fought John Fitch in a quarterfinal bout, the final quarterfinal bout in the Bellator welterweight Grand Prix. And Rory MacDonald took on John Fitch. John Fitch, former number one contender in the UFC, fought George St. Pierre once upon a time. At that time, Fitch was one of the top names in that division, one of the most dangerous guys in the world, one of the most dominant guys in the world at that time. Since then, he's had some peaks and flows. He went from the UFC to World Series of Fighting, won a championship there, and then gets picked up by Bellator when the World Series of Fighting switched to PFL after he fought a couple fights in PFL before they switched to that regular season format. John Fitch is one of those guys that he has some of the best wrestling, top control, pressure, control in the game, albeit he is a lot older. He's probably 39, 40 if I were to take a guess. Not what he once was, but still a dangerous, formidable opponent. Rory MacDonald, obviously, is Rory MacDonald, Bellator welterweight champ, coming off a loss in a champ versus champ fight of Gegard Mousasi versus Rory MacDonald, the fight that was really not even a fight. I mean, Gegard Mousasi pretty much destroyed Rory MacDonald in that fight. So what takes place in the Bellator cage, among all the action that took place, the final results of the fight were a majority draw. And these are very rare in combat sports, but they seem to happen more often in MMA than they do in boxing. And we know why that's the case, because boxing is just so corrupt and ridiculous that we can't even take it seriously. But not only was this a majority draw, this was a fight in which that had the only judge scoring this fight as a win, scored it as a win for John Fitch, not for Rory MacDonald. 46-48, 47-47, and 47-47. So 2 judges overrule 1, and the 2 judges, ruled this a draw. 1 judge ruled it a victory for John Fitch. Rory is going to tell you that he won the fight. John Fitch is going to tell you that he won the fight. Really, it was a close fight, and rightfully so. It could have been called a draw. But John Fitch, with his top pressure, with his mount, with his top control, he was really able to win more rounds, which made me wonder, could this go John Fitch's way after first watching it? Ultimately, the 3 judges, majority draw, Rory wins, moves on in the tournament, whereas John Fitch just packs a lunch and goes home. So a little bit of unfortunate circumstances, especially for John Fitch, because he gets put out of the tournament very quickly and in odd fashion. And for Rory, he moves into the next round to face Nieman Gracie. And really, everyone's looking at him like, do you even belong here still? Should you even be in this tournament still? But the real talk of the fight had nothing to do with the fight. It had everything to do with Rory MacDonald's post-fight interview, where he talked about his relationship with God, and that he doesn't know if he could hurt people anymore the way he used to, and if he doesn't have that passion to hurt people. He doesn't have that passion to go out there and go toe-to-toe because of his newfound relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not going to, heckle Rory MacDonald for that. A lot of podcasts will. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's corny, that's cheesy, that's fake." I'm not gonna make that. I'm just not gonna make that a thing. It's as simple as that. I'm just not gonna make that distinction. I don't think that's right, and I think it's a little ignorant. Who's to say what? I mean, religion is one of the most personal and private things that I think, at least it should be personal and private. My opinion of it is I'm not really a fan when I feel like religion is kind of being shoved down my throat. As I said, religion is a very personal and private thing. And I feel like people can talk about it and talk about their admiration and love and belief in the Lord and everything. But when it's kind of thrown at you unexpectedly by people that you barely know, that's when it gets kind of odd for me. But for Rory MacDonald, this guy literally went out and said what he needed to say and said the following, that his relationship with God is far better due to the fact that he and his wife ultimately, at the time she was his girlfriend, but ultimately became his wife. They started the relationship, and going to church a lot. Family pretty religious. Oh, that's great. I have no problem with that. But when you fight a fight like that, and the final result of that fight is a majority draw, and then you say these things about how you don't know if you can hurt people anymore, you don't know if you have the same passion, same drive because of your relationship with Jesus Christ, and you don't have that anger that Rory MacDonald is always known for having, that psychopathic anger where he would just embrace being in bloodbaths. We saw that with Robbie Lawler. We saw that with Carlos Condit. That's just what Rory MacDonald loves to do, but it didn't really look like he was willing to do that versus John Fitch on Saturday night, which John Fitch is, as I said, he's a dominant fighter, but he's a 25-minute point fighter. He's not a guy that's going to try to knock anybody out, but here Rory was saying all these things that made me wonder if Rory would get knocked out due to the fact that he just wasn't as focused on the fight game as he should be. But I think in Bellator, you do have some executives at that company that are saying, what the hell is this guy talking about? And I hate to say it. I really do. But you got to wonder if there's some real doubt starting to creep in as far as Rory MacDonald's ability to take damage and take punches. The guy's shattered his nose multiple times. Had true horrific injuries from the second fight with Robbie Lawler. So if Rory wants to be done, I think he deserves the right to say, hey, I'm done. But I don't think Rory is done. I think Rory was very shocked at his performance or lack thereof, and also has had many changes in his life, not just a wife, but a kid as well. We were just not the same guy after that. Why would you be the same guy when all those great things start to happen for you? That's how I see it. I think Rory really has something to prove, though, against Nieman Gracie. If he goes out there and loses to Nieman Gracie, then people will be saying he should retire. More UFC news. Daniel Cormier, the UFC heavyweight champion, is signed, sealed, and delivered to fight former UFC heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic. Miocic, the man that DC beat in order to win that UFC heavyweight title over a year ago. And here we are, over a year later. Daniel Cormier's fought Derek Lewis, and Stipe Miocic has fought nobody. Stipe would not take another fight until he was given that rematch, and the fallout of this fight happening is the fact that Brock Lesnar and Daniel Cormier will not duke it out. Now, for all the nostalgia, WWE-esque reasons why I wanted to see Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Cormier, I can't say I'm upset that they're not fighting, because that fight would have really caused some backlash and really would have just, I don't know. It's just one of those things. Would have just caused a lot of backlash among the fans. But you never know. Maybe people would have grown to have loved it. But Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic will do battle August 17th. And I'm hoping that that's a really big card. I think that's a really big fight. Most importantly, I think Thor, or I think what am I even saying? I think right now, when you look at Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic, you have the chance at really having a real rivalry. Stipe Miocic could play the entire thing, promote the entire thing on his own with just, he took what's mine, I'm getting it back. Daniel Cormier could play it as, I took what was his and I'm keeping it. I'm Daniel Cormier. I'm one of the best ever, which I can't really disagree with that. You know, really, I can't say that I'm the biggest DC fan. That's going to shock a lot of people, because I'm a former wrestler, and DC's like USA wrestling all the way. I mean, he's the epitome of what wrestling is. But I can't really say that I'm a massive Daniel Cormier fan. I don't dislike him, but I feel like that first Stipe fight was a little bit, I don't want to say lucky punch. I don't want to say that, because it sounds like I'm taking it away from him. But I feel like DC knows he got one off of Stipe. Where this second fight, Stipe and DC, it's going to be a lot different. The little trick that Daniel Cormier was pulling on Stipe Miocic, getting this collar tie and throwing the punches and then, engaging and disengaging, I think Stipe is going to be ready for that. It's going to be very fun to see how this fight pans out. Nevertheless, I'm really, really excited for these fights, and I will obviously keep you guys tuned in on all of them. My reaction, my prediction, pain. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Ryan Thomas, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the first edition of the Thomas Take, Ryan Thomas's recent MMA recap. Take care.